Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Hey everyone, welcome back to another great show. For those of you who are first-time listeners, as the intro said, we are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses the things schools may have not prepared you for. I am AJ, and with me as always is my co-host, the man who tries to his best to keep the ship afloat. Jason, how you doing?
Doing great, AJ. Excited to jump into another episode with you.
Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are we? I'm
going to go with an 8 on this one.
Okay.
Pretty high.
Yeah. But this is actually a pretty interesting topic that we're going to be talking about today too. It's a hard one for somebody as an educator to hear. And so recently I asked some of my students in class, what is something that you wished your high school would have taught you better or at all that you think would have helped make your transition into college a bit smoother? And I had a bunch of responses, but I had one student's response stuck out to me a lot. And so much so to the point that I felt it was needed to have its own episode. So here's what that student said. They said, I actually wish they didn't put so many ideas in my head about college. In high school, it made me feel like I wasn't good enough for college. And I can tell you, like I said, from not only from a college professor standpoint, but also just from an educator standpoint, that's surprising and tough to hear. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today in this episode. Jason, are you ready to talk about something like that?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. One thing before we do, though, I want to remind everybody, visit Reschool'd.com. That's our website. You can see our past episodes, things like that. We're on all of your favorite podcast sites, Google, Apple, Spotify. Also, follow us on social media. That'll keep you apprised of what we're up to. We are Reschool'd Pod on Twitter, Facebook, and soon to be LinkedIn, I believe.
Also, we're going to be adding some things also with the podcast as we go through each episode too. So we'll keep those apprised on Twitter and Instagram and all that kind of stuff too, so you can keep up with it as well. But before we get to the main topic today, I'm going to ask you a serious question. I'm interested to see what you say about this. But I want you to think back to your first semester in college. What was your biggest fear?
Failure. No question about it. Failure. And it wasn't just academic. I told people on this podcast before that I'm first generation. My brother went to school a year ahead of me, and he did fine his first year. I was nowhere near as good of a student. And honestly, coming out of high school, I wouldn't say that I was adequately prepared for college. I did not put in the effort and the time to prepare myself, not understanding the system, not having somebody to really guide me through it, aside from my brother who went a year ahead of me, who wasn't really there to advise me during the whole process. What I heard in high school, what I saw from others and things like that, it confused me a lot. It scared me a lot. When I got to college, it was a little different than I expected. And I was just scared I was not going to make the cut, that I was not going to pass my classes, or that I just wasn't in a position to keep it all up, that everything was just going to be a waste. I was going to waste time. I was going to waste money. People were going to be disappointed in me because there was a lot of expectation there. You make it to college, people expect that you go on through. So there's the fear there of, am I going to let people down? All that together.
That was mine right there. It wasn't the fear of me failing for the purpose of grade-wise. It was the fear of me not living up to the standard that I had in myself and I thought other people saw in me. Obviously, with my, like I said, my dad, who has gone through he's got postdoctorate. Education's very heavy to him. And I've always looked up to that. And I was always afraid that if you venture out into something, in this situation, if you venture out into education, there's always the opportunity of you not living up to that standard. And so that fear of not living up to that standard really kind of pulled me back a little bit and gave me some struggles early on in my college career. So that I would say that would be my biggest fear is the living up to expectations and standard.
Yeah, that's, you had an influence there that I didn't have, right? You had somebody who knew and understand what was going on. if you didn't meet a standard, they knew exactly the standard you weren't meeting. At least in my situation, most of my family or anyone in my immediate family had never taken any college courses or had never been exposed to how that system works at all. So at the same time, they didn't understand it. I suppose I could have painted that picture however I wanted. It did make it a little more difficult that my brother was a year ahead of me and was doing just fine. But of course, he was always a better student than me. He was always brighter than me. So I was scared then, was I going to fall into, I guess, the doubt and expectations that I had for myself. So
Sure. Well, let's get into the main topic about this idea of not being good enough. I think that was a perfect question, quick question that segued us into this. So first, since we don't know or we don't have all the context behind what this person meant when they said that they didn't feel like they were good enough, what do you think they meant by that? What would you say the definition or the feeling of not being good enough is?
what I would say is that the idea of college as being something that sets you apart, that it's a standard you have to meet, and still 50% of high school graduates in the United States do not go on to college, or at least do not ultimately complete college, even if they go on. So there is a certain failure rate there that's obvious to people. It's built up to people in a certain way that this is what you need to do to move yourself into a different class, social class, I would say, economic. So together, a socioeconomic status or class.
Here's those big
And
words again.
there it is, right? And to to build it up that way, I think it just leads to anxiety, right? You have something in front of you that you could fail at, and it means somehow that you're not as accomplished or not as good a person, which is completely bogus, obviously, but that it's somehow you're lesser than somebody else and will establish your socioeconomic class in society. And that's a real worry when obviously that's not certain. That's not true. It can lead to that. That's a negative part of society, or at least our tendency in Western culture is your education or your level of attained education oftentimes relates to socioeconomic status. But that being said, I think it relates back once again just to that aspect of failure and who I'm going to be in life. And to think that you're not good enough for something implies that there are others who are better than you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I've played sports all my life, and anybody that's played sports on any kind of level knows the feeling of I'm playing on a team, especially obviously if this is a team sport. I'm playing on a team, but I'm second string or I'm third string. I'm not the starter. And there is a level of sitting on what we used to call riding the pine, sitting on the bench, and all you can think of is I'm not good enough to be on the starting squad. I'm not good enough to be the number one. And that is a tall glass of water to drink, in the sense of, you have to have some kind of humility in that. That's why a lot of people, when they get to that point, they tend to not finish out their athletics. They tend to just quit because it's what's the purpose of riding the pine? And I think that can be translated into the college setting to where you feel like you're a second string student. You're not the best. You're not the top of the class. You're not the curve buster. In my class, I hated the curve buster because they always killed the curve for me, and I needed those points. And I hated this person so much, I ended up marrying her. My wife was the curve buster. But I think that's not being able to maintain that standard that either, like you said, culture has created for you, or you have created for you, or your family has created for you, would give you that feeling of not being good enough.
Absolutely. And particularly the environment that people come from. So, school is one thing, right? High school tells you this is what you need to do to prepare for college. This is why you need to go to college. This is what it'll mean for you career wise, personally, if you do go to college. And so, if you make a decision that I'm not going to go to college or I'm going to go to a junior college, or I'm going to go to a technical college versus a 4-year academic institution, or even the school that you go to, right? And certainly in more upper echelon communities, there's this hierarchy of, did you get into a top private school, or did you have to go to a state school, right? Type scenarios. So that exists at every level, outside of school, in the family, in the social environment, that type of things. People just have this tendency to want to classify people based upon their accomplishments, their resources that they've acquired, that type of thing. One thing I have noticed, it's not, people don't often classify you based upon just generally how intelligent you are or how kind you are or things like that. They want to classify you based upon accomplishment, and it's built into our system, this level of education relating to accomplishment. And if people have always treated you a certain way, or you feel like the general influences in your life say, you are in this class of individual, which once again is a very negative, both mentally and personal thing, to be classified by somebody in that way, that all of a sudden you start to believe, perhaps I'm not the type of person that should go on to higher education or traditional higher education, when I can say 100% there is no type of person that education is made for. It's simply, as we've discussed over and over, based upon what you want personally and professionally. That should be the role of it, and it is the role of it. How
Can I
people
say
make you
something real quick?
feel, absolutely.
Because you've said this, and I think we've said it on the past episodes, but I don't think we've ever put a focus on it. And I think it's so important for us to put a focus on this. As you said, it's what you want. It's what you are trying to pursue, what you're focused on. And the common word that you keep saying is what you want, not what your parents want, not what your friends want, not what society wants. It's what you want. And I've seen it time and time again where, I've talked to students and I just go, why are you in college? Like, what's your goal? And they say, well, my parents made me come. And I feel like that's such a bad mindset to go into college with, because then you're not doing it for you, you're doing it for someone else. And that right away is going to set up a whole new standard for you, to where you think you may not be good enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without a question. I mean, you're going to have people who judge you, cast their expectations or opinion upon you. But that's one aspect of confidence. To the extent you have confidence in who you are and who you want to be, because honestly, they go hand in hand. Who you are is always subject to change. And hopefully, it just proceeds in the direction of who you want to be, right? How other people see you, of course, that can be important in terms of your relationship with them. But when it comes to what ultimately you want, what makes you content, it has to be a focus on you. And you have to have confidence when you decide on that the opinions, the perceptions of other people, if they conflict with what you truly want and what you truly desire and what you truly are going to pursue to make your life, then you have to have the confidence to block that out and say, their beliefs about me aren't true. Their expectations for me are irrelevant, right? It's what I want. It is what I want to pursue. Now, I'm not saying just to heck with everybody else, right? Other people are going to help you. Your relationship with other people matter. You need support systems in everything you do, financially, mentally, socially. You need people to be there for you in some way, shape, or form. And people show up for you in various ways. So it's not like their opinions, their perspective does not matter at all. But when it comes to who you want to be, the key word there is you. It's not who others want you to be. I fell into that very early on. I tried to be something that I had no true aspiration to be. It wasn't my passion. It wasn't my interest, because I just wanted to meet expectation of others. And that's a virtue of not having confidence in myself and my own ability. And many of us suffer from that, right? By all outward appearances, a lot of people early on would have said I was aggressive or arrogant, right? Which would have looked like excessive confidence. But it wasn't. It was a lack of confidence. And as we get older, we start to recognize that. People who act in immature ways, or some of the most outspoken people are the ones who have the least confidence.
Yeah, I've battled with that. Growing up, is I've used humor to compensate for my lack of confidence.
Yeah, it cuts both ways. Do you become outspoken, aggressive, or the appearing of overconfident and arrogant to compensate for an underlying lack of confidence in yourself? And so self-worth comes from within. No one else can give you that. I would say if a student says that they feel like they're not good enough, then they've somehow accepted an outside interpretation of what it means to do something, that accomplishing something all of a sudden puts you in a separate class. And that's a problem.
So going into the next question, it kind of is a great segue. We've been talking about this because we've gone on a little bit of a tangent, but it's been really directly associated with this. What areas in the transition of high school to college do you feel creates that gap between expectation and reality?
So in high school, it has been my experience that people build up college as being some magnificent transformational experience. And it can be for many people, just like any experience can be transformational. But college, once again, it's an institution, it has procedures and processes. The way it's built up is often not related to what you can expect on the daily, right? What your daily life will look like. Because in many respects, that's what it is. Every moment is unique. The minute you step foot on campus, everything you do for every minute, it's still part of your routine, what you're going to do. The disconnect there, I would say, is not preparing students for exactly what the daily life is going to be, not preparing them for many of the things we talk about on these podcasts, right? The things that they should expect from college, other than just here's what your class schedule is, this is what you're going to learn about. Here's what Greek life is going to look like if you do that.
And college is hard. That's what I get a lot.
Exactly. College is hard. You got to study. You got to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. But at the same time, you have community or society telling you, oh, it's going to be so much fun. You're going to go to these parties. You're going to meet people. You're going to do these things. But all of the things that go around it, the separation between the two and how you balance those, I think that's what creates the issue. People want to have the fun. They want to have the experience, or they may dread leaving their friends or family and going off to a strange place, whatever your personality is. But then how do you balance all of those personal, social aspects with this is going to be hard. You're going to have to study all the time. You're going to have to do all this, when oftentimes it's more about just creating a routine, creating habits that are going to make you successful.
Yeah, I would agree. And I want to take a different route to answer this question on my side. I think a lot of the gap between expectation and reality comes from the way they're taught in high school. And to no fault to the teachers. It has nothing to do with the teachers. I truly respect the teachers. They're handicapped in a lot of what they have to do in their classrooms. What I'm referring to is there's such a big focus on grades and grades alone in high school, to where the students don't understand the importance of learning over grades. And then they get to college and they try to put that same technique or that same concept into their classes of, I only need to worry about my grades. I need to get the top grades. And they forget about the learning side of it.
I couldn't agree more. I see it all the time.
It's terrible to see, because I have students in my class right now where they're doing homework at home right now, and they ask me, I don't understand how to do this problem. And I look back at their problem. I said, well, you got it right. Well, I got it right for the purpose of the grade. I looked it up to see how you do the problem so I can get the grade right, but they don't have a clue how to do it. A student being able to understand that learning first, grades come. If you put in the time to learn it, then the grades will easily follow right behind it. But if you only focus on the grades, then you're lacking that learning side of it. And so I think that's a huge disconnect between the expectation and reality, because once you get that learning part too, it is the investment of your time. You're putting in time early to learn something so you don't have to relearn it later on. Inevitably in college, you're going to have to take a class where you took something from a prior class and have to use it in a later class. You can either learn it in the first class and take it with you to the second class, or you can more or less memorize it for the purpose of the test in the first one and then have to memorize it again for the second class. And so I think that's a skill that is being lost in high school, of just the truly learning side of it.
I couldn't agree more. And you see it translate into career-wise, what students pursue in terms of how to better their career options while they're in college. The student who is focused on learning above just the test grade or just making a certain grade standard, they're the ones who go out and do experiential learning. They take on secondary projects, they do internships, they take practical classes in their concentrations, they have great relationships with their professors, they join clubs and industry groups inside and outside of the school, and they really make their educational experience worth it. But a student who does that and makes a B rather than an A, in my mind, is getting way more out of college, is getting way more value for their life than the student who simply just wants to make the grade and leave the classroom and be done with it, and they'll figure out what they're going to do in their career later.
My dad told me a while back when I first got into teaching, his advice to me was, you teach the student and the subject will come. You don't just focus on the subject, you teach the student. You teach ways for the students to better themselves, even if it means going outside of the realm of the academic subject. So for me, accounting. When I teach accounting in my financial accounting class, I don't just stay focused on inside the box topics of financial accounting. When we talk about, and for those who've never had a financial accounting, this is going to sound Greek to you, but for instance, notes payables. What about car loans? Well, how do you buy a car? So it's an indirect topic. So it does relate to the topic itself, but it's indirectly related. But it's something that they're going to use more, for the most part, in their normal day-to-day life than what a notes payable is. How to buy a car, how to negotiate for a car. What is the financial impact if you lease versus you finance, or you pay in cash, and all that kind of stuff. To me, that's going to go further with these students and help them not get taken advantage of, for their lack of knowledge when they go buy a car, than how to account for a notes payable. Now, granted, we talk about that too, but again, I want to teach the students how to better their lives in every aspect, not just simply the accounting stuff that we talk about, because 80% of my students are probably not going to be accounting majors or accountants, period.
And that goes back to one of the things we talked about as being the primary advantages of college. Being a more well-rounded person, being able to interact better with society, being able to interact better with a cross-section of people, whether it's the person who's never had an accounting class, who knows nothing about personal or professional finance, and also being able to talk to the business professional or the accountant who has an in-depth understanding of those concepts. So just the value you get there is exceptional.
So what's something students can do now that would help build their confidence, either going into college, or if they're already in college, continuing in on their college careers?
Get a mentor. Actually, let me say this. Get multiple mentors. Ask them to tell you everything they know or can tell you about what their college experience was like, what they wish they had known. Don't let them get away with telling you the platitudes about, what you should do and that type of thing. Get them to explain to you the daily life. Get them to explain to you what that first semester of college felt like, all the things that were pulling them in different directions, all of their interests, all their influences. And honestly, get as many people who will talk to you about that as possible. Because I'm a big proponent of, and as I've said before, the reason I'm really doing this podcast is, life in the academic arena is a game, and you need to learn how to play that game well. Part of playing the game well when you're making a decision and going to college, preparing yourself, is understanding the game to the fullest extent possible. Getting other people to tell you firsthand what their experience was like, down to the minutia. Did they live on campus? Did they live off campus? Did they have roommates? Were there conflicts there? Did they have a boyfriend or girlfriend during their first semesters? Did they join Greek life or did they not? Did they play intramural sports? All of these things. If you can understand all of those things going in, you will be better prepared than you could otherwise be.
Yeah, and speaking of mentors, I had a mentor when I was going through college, because again, in that transition between pre-med to not knowing what I wanted to do, I didn't have a clue how to figure out what I wanted to be outside of a doctor, and I know I just didn't want to be a doctor. So I have a mentor, a great friend of mine who is very, very successful in his career, his professional career, super successful in building companies and selling them, CEOs of companies. I look at him as otherworldly when it comes to his business mind. But I also treat him as just a friend, and he treats me just as a friend. He doesn't treat me any lower. I don't treat him any higher. We're just really good friends. But he's somebody that I go to very often when I have issues, when I have questions, because he's the type of person that just doesn't. If I said, "Hey, I need this," or I just need money. Could he give me the money? He could absolutely give me the money. But it's that give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. That's his response to any question I've ever had is, what are you going to do about it? Oh, I have this problem. Well, what are you going to do about it? I need help figuring this out. Well, what are you going to do about it? And when it came to, I asked him, I said, hey, I don't have a clue what I want to be. I don't know where I want to go with my degree. And he gave me two questions, or actually a question and a statement. He said, what would you do if money was no option? And I met him at a camp. I love working at my camp. I've been working there for 13, 14 years now, volunteering there, doing different things. And I love the aspect of teaching. You're teaching, especially in our camp, we teach about leadership. And so I thought that would be a really cool gig, would be to just teach people how to better themselves. And so I said, I would like to do the camp for my career, which I knew that wasn't a possibility, but he said if money was no option. So I said, I would love to do the camp. And then the second statement he gave me was figure out how to make money off of it. And so that's when I really dove into what the camp was. And it was all about teaching. I thought teaching is just a natural transition for me from being what I do at the camp to doing what I'm actually passionate about. And that's why I love it, because I wake up every morning that I have class and I'm excited to go to class. Like, it's never a dull moment. I love being in front of my students. It's just fun for me. And that's, again, why I wanted to use this podcast as a way to reach even more students. Would you agree with that?
Well, so how it relates to our students, you have figured out the system, how it works. You've been through college, you've been through the professional ranks, and you knew what you were looking for. But also, you were able to identify what mattered most to you. So if you understand the rules of the game and then you understand yourself, then you can start to align those. How can you align your external environment in terms of career, in terms of hobbies, in terms of things that you do on your own that will ultimately fulfill you internally and make it so you have a happy, lucrative, productive career? Hopefully, college for most people can be a mechanism for that you can start to align your external environment with your internal needs. And that is going to lead to ultimately what you will deem as successful, because you will have long-term contentment in your professional and oftentimes, as a result, personal life. And so hopefully these topics that we continue to cover episode after episode are going to build towards that long-term contentment professionally, personally, etc.
Well, I think that's a great place to close off this episode. I think this was a wonderful episode. And I'm excited about the next episode because we're going to be taking on a very common question that I think a lot of up-and-coming college students have, and that is, what's more important, college or getting the experience? So we're going to be discussing that on our next one. So until next time, Jason, do you have anything before we sign off?
Well, AJ, I just want to say I appreciate it. And you guys, don't forget, visit our website, drop us some questions. If there are things you want to hear about, we're more than willing to talk about it.
Well, that sounds wonderful. Well, y'all have a good one, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.